We just received the Raiden Shogun Story Quest Act 2 in Update 2.5. It was the first thing I did when the update dropped, and I thought it was simply fantastic. It adds so much more to Ei's character, and it also gives a ton of lore behind the catastrophe that fell upon Inazuma 500 years ago when the destruction of Khaenri'ah happened. Additionally, it also gave us a new weekly boss, and my favorite one yet. I wanted to share my thoughts on the story quest and also provide some analysis on things I noticed and learned. In Act 1 of the story quest, we see how Ei really starts to consider changing her views on eternity after she explores the modern-day Inazuma with the Traveler and Paimon. Essentially, Ei starts to consider change, which goes against her initial static view of eternity. Even though Inazuma has changed so much since she isolated herself in her plane of euthymia, Inazuma will always be Inazuma. Some things can remain the same even though the things around them change. So she revolves to end her period of solitude in the plane of euthymia. That was a short summary of Act 1. It left me still wanting to know more about her character and motives, so I'm happy that Act 2 delivered beautifully on that. We start Act 2 accepting a commission from Catherine to investigate why rift hounds are suddenly appearing and attacking the sacred sakura tree's roots. When we engage the first group of rift hounds, Ei appears and helps us out. Initially, I was confused because the game suggested it was the Raiden Shogun, which confused me because whenever the Musou no Hitotachi is used, it's usually Ei using it. So I was confused at first, but it is clarified quickly that it is in fact Ei who's there with us. But also, I became interested in why Ei herself is stepping in. Why not just leave the matter for the Tenryou and Yashiro commissions? Why not leave it for the Shogun puppet? She reveals to us that this is a personal matter for her because these Rifttown attacks remind her of the catastrophe upon Inazuma 500 years ago. It's here that I think introduces us to one of her core struggles, dealing with the atrocities from her past. It becomes more clear that she struggles letting go of the past and moving on from it. She's haunted by them. I think it sucks that after 500 years of solitude in her plane of euthymia, when she finally comes out of her shell, she's taken straight back into Rifttown attacks that bring her painful memories back, as if she's forced to relive what made her isolate herself in the first place. Ei reveals to us how she still carries the scars from this disaster with her today. There are two main reasons for this, which both stem from her being in a combat-focused position. The first reason is that unlike her sister Makoto, Ei was more focused on being a warrior. While Makoto directly interacted with their people in social affairs, Ei mainly partook in the battlefield. Because of this, Ei never had direct experience nor time to lead her people, and to understand them. Ei's name means shadow after all, and she worked more behind the scenes compared to Makoto. The second reason is also related to her martial prowess. It's that despite having so much might, she wasn't able to protect the ones she loves. Despite all her power, she felt powerless against the catastrophe. While this is a shame that she is reliving these feelings, there is a bright side to this when we encounter the various Ley Line Memories during the Rifttown investigation. We encounter memories of Inazumans during the catastrophe in real time, and through interacting with these memories, Ei provides them with closure, and they provide her with closure as well. With Kitamura, he was a samurai defending against the attacks on Inazuma, and notes that when both the almighty Shogun and Kitsune Saigu were gone, hope was the only thing left for the people. Ei calms him down and gives him closure by reinforcing that he was correct in placing his trust in the almighty Shogun. This memory emphasizes one of my favorite themes that's repeated in all of the next memories, which is the Inazuman's unwavering faith in the almighty Shogun, and how it's something eternal in its own right. The next memory involves Furuyama, who was a tea master and part of the Shogun's retinue. In his situation, he stayed behind while everyone else ran from the looming enemies, because he didn't see a point in running if even the almighty Shogun is unable to resolve the conflicts. We learned from him more about Makoto, who is described to have been an adventurer and dreamer at heart, who believed that people should make the most of their lives, as nothing lasts forever. It's another point that shows the difference in viewpoints between Ei and Makoto. Back when the traveler confronted Ei in the plane of Euthymia for the second time, Ei mentioned that the Vision Hunt decree had her tacit approval because the idea of taking away people's dreams fit in line with her static view of eternity, and to protect people from perishing while chasing their ambitions. This is a polar opposite viewpoint from Makoto's, though it seems more understandable to me now as to why Ei arrived at this viewpoint. During this dialogue with Furuyama, I noticed Ei hardly says anything, only adding near the end that she can fetch a tea set. I think Ei is absorbing the nostalgia of the more peaceful times back then, when she attended activities with Makoto as a Kagemusha. Additionally, Furuyama is describing and seemingly talking as if it's Makoto that he's talking to, so I think Ei wouldn't know how to respond. Instead, I think she's reminiscing about Makoto through Furuyama's stories. So when we move to the Kamisato estate for a tea set, out of hearing range of Furuyama, Ei shares a heavy-hearted story, and tells us exactly what she went through back then. How she lost the Kitsune Saigu and how Makoto went to Khaenri'ah by herself without telling Ei. This to me was really suspicious because as Ei wonders, why would Makoto, who's not as combat proficient as Ei, go to the dangerous Khaenri'ah without mentioning anything? Ei thinks Makoto may have wanted to protect Ei, and while this makes sense to me, I also just feel like there are some hidden motives from places like Celestia that may have wanted Makoto gone for whatever reason, using the destruction of Khaenri'ah as a way to lead Makoto into death. This may be a more broader plot point which should be elaborated later on in the story, especially because we later learn that Makoto had ties to Istaroth, one of the four shades of the Primordial One. Anyways, back to Ei. I think it makes much more sense why she took upon a different view of eternity after Makoto's death. With Makoto's abrupt death and Ei's sudden and rushed transition to being Inazuma's ruler, I really think that she was too emotionally unstable to follow directly in Makoto's footsteps, and this scarred her so much that there is no way she could consider risking something like that happening again. Thus, she pursued the opposite side of eternity, the eternity of stasis, where she would be neglecting dreams and aspirations in hopes of preventing a disaster like this from happening ever again. But now she's able to slowly realize the problem with her static view, as she's had time to start moving on from the past, as well as having actually talked with her people. Even though they're memories, she sees more clearly why Makoto's path is a more sincere one. The final memories with the Shogunate samurai were perhaps my favorite interactions. For starters, we see that Ei has been feeling unwell, as she's been trying her best to conserve her energy as much as possible. As her body slowly malfunctions, the Shogunate samurai appear from the ley lines, and we aid them in fending off the rest of the rift towns. Something that stood out to me was Ei telling them that it's too dangerous to fight, which goes to show again how stubborn of a person she is, as she's someone who seems to want to carry most of the burdens by herself. I love how the Shogunate samurai kind of dismiss this and demonstrate their unwavering loyalty for the shogun. It got me really emotional how they insist that they protect the shogun if she's in danger. They emphasize again that the people need the leadership of the almighty shogun, and how without the shogun, despair follows. Ei is shown once again just how important the shogun's presence is to the people of Inazuma, how the shogun is the lightning of Inazuma that guides the people away from the darkness and into the future. Because of that, Ei cannot lead in solitude from her plane of Euthymia. She has to be there for her people. I'm in deep admiration of the people of Inazuma, because no matter what, they will always place their faith in the almighty shogun. From the past, and even to this day, they still believe, "Glory to the shogun." That quote is still said to this very day, most notably from Kujo Sara. It's cathartic how moved Ei is by all of this. I think it's at this moment, after finally interacting with her people, that she is able to and resolves to move on from the past, and to guide Inazuma and its people into the future. And that she shouldn't do this alone, because the people need the shogun to be there with them. It's just like how Makoto was able to lead with the people, to have people like Furuyama in their retinue who are able to advise the shogun. That a leader doesn't have to shoulder all the burdens by themselves. Interacting with and trying to understand the people was something Ei desperately needed to do, and by doing so with the Ley Line Memories, she's able to see a brighter path for Inazuma.
Oh. Thank you all very much. I promise you that I will create a bright future for Inazuma. I should not have left it this late to make this promise. But from this moment forth, know that I shall be true to my word.
It's just like how Makoto believed. The eternity that is pursued is that constant driving force that makes humans generate ambitions that propel them to keep moving forward. Makoto's name also means sincerity. It is important to maintain the sincere desire to keep on chasing one's dreams. This is now the eternity that Ei will also pursue for her people. This is what she promises to the people of Inazuma, and also what she promises to herself. This is her farewell to the past. Finally, we reach the part of the story quest where Ei has to prove that her newfound resolve is stronger than her previous ideals. Throughout the investigation, Ei was having trouble with her body because she was developing a new ideal, and this conflicted with the previous static ideal of eternity that she programmed into her Raiden Shogun puppet. Ei's new ideal is now a threat to the Raiden Shogun, and now she has to sever her ties with her previous ideal. The concern that the Raiden Shogun has is valid. How do we know that Ei's new resolve is not simply a result of erosion? How do we make sure that Ei won't falter again from her path? This is the threat that the Shogun sees, and what Ei has to prove and overcome. With the Ley Line Memories, Ei overcame her past trauma, and now with the Raiden Shogun, Ei has to overcome the manifestation of those past ideals, with her new ideals. It's a tough battle for Ei because the Shogun was created to resist erosion, and has a will stronger than any living being. This weekly boss, the Magatsu Mitake Narukami no Mikoto, has become my favorite boss fight, and a boss I will look forward to fighting each week. I believe the name of this boss can be roughly translated as the calamitous deity that governs lightning. I love the design of this boss as it fits a ton with the authority that the Shogun has, and how it's used to combat any threats to eternity. The fact that the Shogun uses it goes to show how much Ei has changed her mind regarding eternity. The design seems to match in with the themes of Susanoo from Japanese mythology, as Susanoo is the god of sea and storms, which does fit in with the Shogun being the god of Inazuma, the isolated nation of lightning. The design gives me a lot of vibes from Sasuke Uchiha's Susanoo from Naruto, where this form uses skeletal humanoid-like body parts to aid it in battle. I love everything about this new boss, everything from its design, the OST, which I am still waiting for an official release on, the boss mechanics, and the atmosphere of the battle. It's a lot of fun to watch and fight, especially seeing the final calamity attack that straight up one-shots us if we don't properly shield. After the initial fight, due to how powerful and unwavering the Shogun's will is, Ei must keep fighting until she can prove herself, so she does this herself. But as Yae Miko puts it, Ei once again rushed into battle without help, and as she should have learned, she doesn't have to fight everything alone. She needs our help, and by being there for her, Ei is reminded that she doesn't have to fight with her strength alone. Because of this, Ei is able to utilize the full power of Musou Ishin, and the Shogun accepts this as Ei's victory. Now, instead of the Shogun ruling Inazuma, the Shogun will become Ei's assistant as Ei herself rules Inazuma. Also, as a potential side note, I'm still wondering what Ei has to say regarding Scaramouche, or Kuni Kuzushi, as he's closely related to the Shogun. After all, Scaramouche does have the Gnosis, and Ei hasn't commented at all about this. This is likely just a future plot point, but it will be interesting to see what Ei thinks of him, especially since Ei sees the puppet as its own being and not just a tool. As for the final scene where Makoto's final consciousness is released, I'm still trying to figure out what exactly happened and what it can represent. Here's what I think so far. After Makoto's death, Ei's ideals became so entrenched that she couldn't bear to accept any other ideals. Thus, Makoto had to wait for a time when Ei would finally break free of her static ideal of eternity. After Ei did so, Makoto felt that it was finally a worthwhile time to have one last moment with Ei. I'm glad that Makoto tells us that she wishes she could have done things differently. She regrets not having helped Ei slowly transition into ruling Inazuma. This gives more weight as to why Ei did what she did, because everything was so sudden, especially with the severity of what was happening in Khaenri'ah. The seed of the miracle tree that Makoto gives Ei is something that transcends time and space. 500 years ago, Ei came back to Inazuma to see the sacred sakura tree, but was surprised to see it. And it looks like it's because it was Ei in the future that planted the tree, and the tree transcended time and space to grow 500 years in the past. Makoto was always grateful for Ei's protection, and so she wanted the sakura tree to be there to protect Inazuma while Ei transitioned into ruling Inazuma. Again, Ei even admitted that without the sacred sakura tree, she likely wouldn't have been able to resolve the disaster 500 years ago. This is a bit complicated because Ei was the one that needed to plant the tree. So for now, the explanation is that Makoto needed the power of some higher being to make this happen, and it is presumed that Makoto had some connection with Iztaroth, one of the four shades of the primordial one. This exposes us to even more lore, continuing off the lore of the primordial one that we got from Enkanomiya in the Before Sun and Moon books. Because of the connection between Makoto and Iztaroth, it makes me question more about exactly what happened with Iztaroth and Enkanomiya, as well as adding to my suspicion as to what played out at Khaenri'ah. Perhaps Makoto was gotten rid of as some collateral because of her connection to Iztaroth. I also got reminded of the idea of being a gardener that Albedo brought up during the Shadows Amidst Snowstorm event. Anyways, back to the present time, we go over the finishing touches of the quest. We're back in Inazuma, and the first thing Ei does is abolish the Sakoku decree, finally opening up Inazuma's borders to the world again. A cool Easter egg with this is that we can now go back and forth between Liyue and Inazuma now, without any thunder striking us down. So I decided to spend upwards of 10 to 20 plus minutes and take the Wave Rider and ride around the waters in Liyue and Mondstadt. I hope that in the future we get permanent Wave Rider waypoints in places that are not just Inazuma. That pretty much wraps up the Raiden Shogun Story Quest Act 2, a fantastic one where I enjoyed every minute of it. Everything was wonderful, from the voice acting of everyone involved, the interactions with the memories, the lore that we got, the new weekly boss, the cutscenes, and to Ei's own strong and emotional character development, where I appreciate her character even more now. So yeah, thank you to Hoyoverse for the wonderful story quest, and I continue looking forward to more story and character content in Genshin Impact.